and spend the rest of the night with us. Oh, GL is there too well. Ed. Yes, my house. Art Carney and Joyce Randolph lit up television screens in the 1950s as Ed and Trixie Norton, the lovable neighbors on the Honeymooners. Their on-screen chemistry was effortless, and millions of viewers assumed that bond must have extended off-screen too. But when the series ended, something strange happened. The two never spoke again, not once. No phone calls, no reunions, nothing. At first glance, it might seem like simple distance, like two coworkers drifting apart after the job is done. But was it really that simple? Or was something deeper going on behind the scenes? It turns out the truth is far more complicated and far more emotional than anyone realized. What really happened between Art Carney and Joyce Randolph has remained a quiet mystery for decades. But now, we finally know why they never spoke again. Stay tuned, because the truth might just change everything you thought you knew about America's favorite neighbors. On screen, Art Carney and Joyce Randolph were magic. As Ed and Trixie Norton, they brought humor, heart, and warmth into American living rooms week after week. Their bickering, loving dynamic felt so real that millions of fans were convinced the two must have shared a close bond off-camera. After all, how could anyone fake that kind of chemistry? But the reality behind the scenes could not have been more different. While Jackie Gleason and Audrey Meadows occasionally clashed or joked around between takes, Carney and Randolph kept things cool and professional. They were never hostile, far from it, but they also were not friends. They simply showed up, delivered their lines, and went home. No shared dinners, no backstage gossip, no lingering conversations once the director yelled cut. In later interviews, Joyce herself confirmed the distance. She described Carney as kind and incredibly talented, but reserved. He did not open up, and he certainly did not engage with cast members outside of work hours. It was, as she put it, strictly business. Yet, to the millions watching at home, none of that was visible. They seemed inseparable. This created a powerful illusion, one that lasted for decades. Even long after the show ended, fans would ask Joyce what it was like to work so closely with Art Carney. Many assumed the two kept in touch, maybe even remained lifelong friends. But behind the scenes, it was never more than a working relationship, one that ended the moment the Honeymooners wrapped production. And the real question that lingered for years was not whether they were friends, but why they never became ones in the first place. But, as we will see next, the answer to that has everything to do with who Art Carney really was once the cameras stopped rolling. To understand why Art Carney never reconnected with Joyce Randolph, or anyone from the Honeymooners for that matter, we have to look beyond the studio lights and into the deeply private world he kept hidden from the public. On screen, Carney was lovable and goofy, the kind of neighbor everyone wished they had. But off-screen, he was a man marked by wounds that never fully healed. Before his rise to stardom, Art Carney had served in the United States Army during World War II. He was wounded in the leg during the Battle of Normandy and walked with a limp for the rest of his life. But the physical injury was only part of the story. Friends and biographers later revealed that Carney suffered from post-traumatic stress long before the term was widely understood. He battled with depression and anxiety, and he developed a drinking problem that haunted him for years. While his comedic timing and charm made him a star, his private world was full of shadows. He was never the kind of actor who enjoyed fame. In fact, he often found it unbearable. Unlike Jackie Gleason, who thrived in the spotlight, Carney would perform his scenes, do press only when necessary, and vanish the moment filming ended. He rarely stayed to socialize on set and kept to himself during breaks. To many of his co-workers, including Joyce, he remained something of a mystery. He once said in an interview that he had no interest in being part of the Hollywood scene, and he meant it. Carney avoided red carpets, skipped reunions, and declined many interview requests, even after winning an Academy Award in the 1970s, a stunning moment of professional triumph. He quickly disappeared from the public eye once again. This intense need for privacy shaped every relationship he had. He was not rude or cold, but he was closed off, emotionally guarded in a way that often left others puzzled. Joyce Randolph later recalled that although he was respectful and easy to work with, he never opened up. There was no small talk, no shared confidences, no lasting connection beyond their time on set. Understanding this side of art, Carney casts his silence in a different light. It was not about dislike or conflict. It was about retreat, a lifelong pattern of pulling away from people in situations that made him feel exposed. And sadly, it meant that even his most iconic screen partner never truly knew the man behind the performance. But for Joyce Randolph, that distance would never be fully explained, and her reflections reveal something even more personal. Joyce Randolph spent decades answering questions about art. Carney. Fans always wanted to know, what was he really like off-camera? Was he as funny, as warm, as charming as the Ed Norton they saw on television? Her answer never changed. He was talented, professional, and completely private. She admitted that his silence after the show ended came as a surprise. They had worked together closely for years, but when filming wrapped, he disappeared. No message, no call, no reunion, nothing. At first, Joyce thought maybe she was the only one left out. But as time passed, she realized he had withdrawn from everyone. Even Jackie Gleason, who had a decades-long connection with Carney, rarely heard from him again. Audrey Meadows also remarked on his absence. Carney skipped every reunion, tribute, or retrospective tied to the Honeymooners. He did not offer public comments or respond to invitations. It was as if he had chosen to erase that part of his life entirely. Joyce never speculated publicly about why she never accused him of anything. Instead, she remained gracious. She praised his brilliance, called him very quiet, and left it at that. Still, there was a trace of sadness in her words, not anger, just a quiet kind of disappointment, a sense that the closeness so many assumed had never been real, and that maybe, deep down, she wished it had been. Whatever had kept Art Carney distant, it followed him long after the show was over. When the Honeymooners ended its original run in the mid-1950s, each cast member faced a new chapter. For some, that meant even greater fame. For others, it meant slowly stepping away from the spotlight. And for Joyce Randolph and Art Carney, their post-Honeymooners lives could not have been more different, both in direction and in spirit. Joyce Randolph, who had made a name for herself as the sweet but sharp-witted Trixie, found herself gradually retreating from television. She appeared in a handful of roles after the show ended, but never pursued a high-profile acting career. She shifted her focus toward her personal life, settling into a quieter rhythm that included stage performances and family. Joyce married successful marketing executive Richard Lincoln Charles and had a son. In the years that followed, she rarely sought the spotlight. But when called upon to talk about the Honeymooners, she always made time, always with dignity, grace, and a touch of nostalgic affection. Art Carney, on the other hand, took a different route, one that seemed, on paper, far more glamorous, but was far more isolating. In the years after the Honeymooners, Carney took on a variety of dramatic roles that surprised critics. For a man known for his comedic brilliance, he showed incredible depth and vulnerability on screen. In 1974, he shocked the entertainment world by winning the Academy Award for Best Actor for Harry and Tonto, a quiet, character-driven film about an aging man on a cross-country journey. It was a role full of melancholy, introspection, and subtle charm. In many ways, a reflection of Carney himself. But even as his career soared, his presence in public life shrank. He rarely gave interviews. He turned down most social appearances. He skipped almost every major tribute, reunion, or retrospective related to the Honeymooners. While Joyce was answering fan mail and sharing stories, Carney was withdrawing further into his private world. Some saw it as humility. Others suspected it was exhaustion. A man worn down by years in an industry he never quite trusted. The geographic distance between them did not help either. Joyce stayed rooted in New York, a city she loved, and where the Honeymooners had been filmed. Carney, meanwhile, moved around and eventually settled into a quieter life, far from the noise of Hollywood or Broadway. There were no joint appearances, no talk show reunions, not even a photograph to suggest they had ever crossed paths again. As the years passed, Joyce would occasionally be asked if she ever heard from Art. Her answer never changed. No, that was it. Not a single word, not even when the show was honored by the Television Academy. Not even when fans begged for a reunion. Whatever connection they had on screen had vanished the moment the show wrapped. And as both of their lives moved forward, it became increasingly clear that the silence between them was not just accidental. It was permanent. But what many people missed was that it was not just Joyce who lost contact with Carney. He had cut ties with almost everyone from the show. And the reason why might surprise you. For years, fans assumed that Joyce Randolph had been the only one Art Carney lost touch with after the Honeymooners ended. But that was not the case. In truth, Carney distanced himself from nearly everyone involved with the show, even the ones he had been publicly close to during production. And to this day, no one knows exactly why. Jackie Gleason, the show's star and creator, maintained a powerful presence in the entertainment world for decades. Gleason and Carney had a famously strong working relationship. They had brilliant chemistry, a natural rhythm in their performances, and a comedic partnership that felt effortless. But once the cameras stopped rolling, even that bond faded. Carney did not appear at most of Gleason's major career events, skipped televised tributes, and declined interviews about their time together. Audrey Meadows, who played Alice Cramden, also expressed confusion over Carney's absence. Like Joyce, she had fond memories of working with him, but acknowledged that after the show ended, he simply vanished. No calls, no cards, no contact. It was as if he had closed the door on that chapter of his life and never looked back. At first, people assumed it was just a case of someone being private, maybe shy or introverted. But over time, it became clear that Carney's withdrawal was far more extreme than anyone had realized. He did not just step back from the public eye, he completely erased himself from the show's legacy. When the Honeymooners was inducted into the Television Hall of Fame, Carney did not attend. When cast retrospectives aired, he was nowhere to be found. Even in the age of nostalgia television, when nearly every major classic series held reunions or specials, Carney never once appeared in a Honeymooners reunion, even though Joyce and others made themselves available. The silence was deafening, and naturally, speculation began to swirl. Some believed he had grown bitter about being typecast. Despite his Oscar win and respected dramatic roles, many people still remembered him first and foremost as Ed Norton. That label followed him for years, and it may have felt like a prison rather than a legacy. Others thought it was more personal, a reflection of his mental health battles, his ongoing struggles with anxiety and depression, and his desire to shut out painful memories from a time in his life that may not have been as joyful as it seemed. There was no dramatic feud, no falling out, no scandal. But sometimes the absence of conflict is just as telling. Carney's total retreat left the rest of the cast and the fans wondering if he had been quietly suffering all along. And for Joyce Randolph, who remained gracious through it all, the silence must have felt both puzzling and permanent. But even in his final years, when the world had largely moved on, Art Carney still held tight to that silence, and the decisions he made at the end of his life only deepened the mystery. As the years turned into decades, the Honeymooners remained frozen in time, a black and white snapshot of a simpler television era. But behind that timeless image, the cast aged, the world changed, and opportunities for reconnections slowly slipped away. For Joyce Randolph, those years brought clarity. For Art Carney, they brought only silence. Joyce spent her later life reflecting openly on her career. Though she had stepped away from the spotlight long ago, she was never far from the hearts of Honeymooners fans. She appeared at tribute events, gave thoughtful interviews, and spoke with a mix of pride and nostalgia about her time as Trixie. She understood the cultural impact of the show and was always happy to keep its memory alive. And yet, whenever Art Carney's name came up, her answers remained unchanged. She had not seen him, had not heard from him, not once. There was no falling out, no harsh words, just a silence she never truly understood. She acknowledged that he had been distant, even during filming, but after the show wrapped, he simply vanished from her life. And from what she could tell, he had done the same with everyone else. She never expressed anger or resentment. In fact, Joyce remained remarkably gracious when speaking about Carney. He was a genius, she once said, but very quiet. That was as close as she ever came to an explanation. She seemed to accept that whatever kept him away was his alone to carry, and that she might never get a real answer. Meanwhile, Art Carney aged away from the public eye. After his Academy Award win, he made a few more selective film appearances, but never fully returned to the mainstream. He declined invitations for interviews, tributes, and retrospectives. As his health declined, he remained largely invisible to the fans who still adored him and the co-stars who once stood beside him. When Carney passed away in 2003 at the age of 85, it marked the end of an era. But it also solidified something that many had long suspected. Whatever kept him away from his past, he had carried it with him to the very end. No final interviews, no parting words, no public statements about the Honeymooners, Joyce Randolph, or the legacy he helped create. Joyce, who lived until 2024, outlived nearly everyone from the cast. She remained a quiet ambassador for the show and a willing voice for the fans. And while she never did get the answers she may have once hoped for, she seemed at peace with that. Carney had made his choice, and she had made hers. Still, one question lingered. Was it really just distance, or was there more beneath the surface, something too private, too painful, or too personal for even Joyce to understand? To this day, fans continue to wonder, and that mystery, quiet and unresolved, only deepened when whispers and speculation began to surface. When two co-stars never speak again, fans naturally start to speculate. Over the years, rumors swirled about Joyce Randolph and Art Carney. Was there a falling out, a disagreement, something personal that drove them apart? But no evidence ever surfaced. No feud, no confrontation, just silence. Carney did not only cut off Joyce, he distanced himself from nearly everyone connected to the Honeymooners. He declined interviews, skipped reunions, ignored tributes. Jackie Gleason and Audrey Meadows both noted his absence. It was as if he had erased that entire part of his life. Some believed he resented being typecast as Ed Norton. Others pointed to his ongoing mental health battles, depression, trauma, alcoholism, all things Carney lived with quietly. And for a man who already hated the spotlight, the idea of revisiting a past he may have found painful was likely unthinkable. Still, people kept hoping for a comment, a reunion, a moment of closure. But it never came. Joyce, to her credit, never fed the rumors. She consistently said the same thing. Art Carney was kind, brilliant, and very private. He did not speak to her again, but she never believed it was out of malice, only mystery. In a way, the silence became its own legacy, not loud or dramatic, but deeply human. A quiet space where two talented people had once created something timeless and then walked away from it forever. And when Joyce looked back, her final thoughts offered something far more powerful than any explanation. In the end, the story of Art Carney and Joyce Randolph is not one of betrayal or bitterness. It is about two performers who brought a fictional marriage to life so convincingly that millions believed it must have been real, but it never was. There was no final conversation, no reunion, no resolution. The Bond viewers imagined simply did not exist off-screen. Joyce accepted that with grace. She never claimed there was bad blood, but when asked if she ever heard from Carney again, her answer was always the same. No, she never heard from him, not after the final episode, not after his Oscar win, not when The Honeymooners was honored decades later. Carney had made his choice. He stepped away from the spotlight and never looked back. No public reflections, no statements, just silence. It was not a rejection of Joyce. It was a pattern that defined his life. Joyce, for her part, carried the legacy forward. She gave interviews, attended events, and spoke kindly of her co-stars, even the ones she never saw again. She outlived the rest of the main cast and remained the last voice willing to share what really happened. And what she shared was simple. Art Carney was a genius, but he was also deeply private. Their story is a reminder that even the most iconic on-screen connections do not always mirror reality. Sometimes silence is not about conflict. It is about who a person chooses to be when the cameras stop rolling. Carney disappeared. Joyce remained, and the distance between them became its own quiet chapter in television history. One filled with laughter on screen and unanswered questions off of it.